everybody, and welcome back to A Court of Words and Pages. My name is Natalie. So today I'm going to be bringing you guys my February TBR. So I don't usually do TBRs very often, and that's because I'm very much a mood reader. But I really want to work on giving myself like a guideline of where I can go and read for the month. And so what I've done is I've basically just found a bunch of books that I thought sound interesting, stuff I've gotten from the library and stuff off of my bookshelf, and said, okay, this is kind of what I want to read in February. If I read it all, that's great, but if I don't end up reading all of these books and read other things, that's fine too. Also, I just want to say I'm sorry if you can hear any strange noises in the background. It is currently sleeting outside, so you may be able to hear that, and I'm sorry. The first two books I'm going to be talking about are books I don't have a physical copy of. The first one because I have it out on Libby, and the second one because it isn't out yet. So the first book I want to read this month is Stormbreaker by Anthony Horwich, which is the first book in the Alex Rider series. So, if I'm being totally honest, I don't know what Stormbreaker specifically is about, but I know the series follows Alex Rider, who is recruited to be part of a British spy agency. I'm not quite sure if it's MI6, but some sort of British spy agency. So, the reason I want to read this one without really knowing what it's about is because my family has recently started watching the Alex Rider TV show that they made, and it is so good. I don't know if this first season is based on the first book. I think I heard something that it was possibly based on the second one, but I still want to read the series because I love spy books, and I think it'll be a fun time, and I'm really excited to read it. The second book that I want to read that I don't have a physical copy of is because it's not out yet, but it does come out in February, and that is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. So I'm really excited for this book, despite A Court of Thorns and Roses not being my favorite series by Sarah J. Maas. I like most of the characters, but I think the world building isn't as great as some of her other books. But I'm excited to read this one because I really think I'm going to enjoy the two main characters. A Court of Silver Flames is the start of a new series in the Akatar world, and I know this one specifically follows Nesta and Cassian. Cassian was one of my favorite characters from the original trilogy, and I definitely have some mixed feelings about Nesta, but I completely trust Sarah J. Maas to make me love her by the end of this book, and I am so excited for it. As soon as I can get my hands on a copy of this book, I am reading it. So moving on to some books that I have a physical copy of. The first one I want to talk about is The Picture of Dorian Gray, because if you watched my goals video of 2020, you know one of my goals of the year is to read a classic every month, and I decided I want to read this one in February. I don't know a whole lot about this book, but I know it basically follows this man named Dorian Gray, who commissions a painting of himself, and so the painting starts to age instead of he does, so he stays young for a really long time. And I think to be able to get this painting, he has to sell his soul or something, and I think this book is kind of about moral corruption and a descent into madness, and I think it sounds really good. And also, it's fairly short. The copy I have is 230 pages, so I'm hoping it won't take me very long. And I really want to try to read this one earlier in the month as opposed to my book for January, which I waited until the last 3 days of the month to read. So I'm looking forward to reading this one. I hope I really do enjoy it. And yeah, the next book I want to read is one I'm not quite sure when I'll get to in the month because I'm waiting for my friend to finish the previous book in the series, but that is The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. I am so excited to read this book. I read the first two books in the Mistborn trilogy in January, and I gave them both 5 stars. They were so good, and the way that the second book left off just made me so anxious to dive immediately into this one, but I have to wait for my friend to finish The Well of Ascension before I can do this, so she needs to read it quickly, because as soon as she finishes and gets a copy of this one, I am jumping right in. So Mistborn is set in a world where the magic system is controlled by metals, and people who can control magic can usually just digest one type of metal, which gives them one specific power, except for Mistborn, who have access to all the different types of magic. So we follow Kelsier, who is a Mistborn, and he is planning to overthrow the oppressive government that has been in rule called the Final Empire, and he's trying to overturn the government, and he basically runs into this young girl one day named Vin, who he finds out is also a Mistborn, and decides to recruit her onto his mission to overthrow the government. So Mistborn is such a unique book because it's pretty much set on the premise of, well, what if the Dark Lord wins? We always have all these stories of the Chosen One and the Dark Lord fighting, and the Chosen One always wins. Well, what if the Dark Lord won? And it's set in a society that has been oppressed by this one man for the last thousands of years. And you really see how a lot of these people, they don't have the will to try to fight back or do anything, and suddenly you have this group of people who they don't think they can succeed, but they're going to try to. Mistborn was such an amazing book. The way that Brandon Sanderson explains the magic system makes it so easy to understand, and the magic system is based around metal, and like pushing and pulling on it is a major part. So that makes some of the fight scenes really interesting to use. I love the main characters. Vin and Kelsier are two amazing characters, and I'm so excited to move on to the Hero of Ages and see how he's going to end the series, and then I can move on to more of the Cosmere. Next up is another book in a series, and that is Blue Lily, Lily Blue by Maggie Stiefvater. So throughout December and January, I've been working on my reread of The Raven Cycle, which was one of my favorite books of last year, and I couldn't explain to you why I want to reread this series, but I really do. I have thoroughly enjoyed my reread of the first two books, and I'm so excited to get to this one because this is one of my favorite ones in the series. So Blue Lily, Lily Blue is the third book in the Raven Cycle. The Raven Cycle is a really hard series to explain because it doesn't necessarily have a very understandable plot or magic system, but basically we're following these group of 4 boys plus Blue who are going on the quest to find a dead/missing old Welsh king who it's rumored that whoever finds him will be granted a wish, and they're trying to find him to get said wish, and it's just from there. It's so amazing. This is definitely more of a character-driven story as opposed to a plot one, and it's very whimsical and magical, and it's one of my favorite books. The characters in this series are so well fleshed out, from the 4 main boys to Blue. It's just a fabulous book, and this was definitely one of my favorites, and I'm very excited to be able to continue my reread. One that I don't know a whole lot about, but I'm really excited to read, is The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. So I couldn't exactly explain to you why I'm excited to read this, except for from the trailers I've seen of the movie and briefly things I've read about this book. I think it's going to be kind of similar to National Treasure, but darker. National Treasure is a movie I really enjoyed, not just necessarily because of its humor, which I don't think the Da Vinci Code is going to have, but because of like the historical quest where they're using like historical documents or landmarks to go to find something. And I think that's what the Da Vinci Code is going to have from National Treasure, and that makes me really excited. So, because I don't know too much about this one, I'll read you the synopsis. While in Paris on business, Harvard symbologist Robert Langdon receives an urgent late-night phone call. The elderly curator of the Louvre has been murdered inside the museum, a baffling cipher found near the body. As Langdon and a gifted French cryptologist, Sophie Neveu, sort through the bizarre riddles, they are stunned to discover a trail of clues hidden in the works of the Da Vinci. Clues invisible for all to see, and yet ingeniously disguised by the painter. The stakes are raised when Langdon receives a startling link. The late curator was involved in the Priory of Sion, an actual secret society whose members included Sir Isaac Newton, Botticelli, Victor Hugo, and Da Vinci, among others. Langdon suspects that they are on the hunt for a breathtaking historical secret, one that has proven through the centuries to be as enlightening as it is dangerous. In a frantic race through Paris and beyond, Langdon and Neveu find themselves matching wits with a faceless power broker who appears to anticipate their every move. Unless they can decipher the labyrinth puzzle, the Priory secret, and an explosive ancient truth will be lost forever. So it sounds really interesting. History is a subject that I'm really interested in, and I'm always constantly looking to learn more about, so I think this one's going to be really interesting. And if I do like it, I know this is part of a series that I could then continue reading on the series, and at least 2 books of the series have been adapted into movies, so I could always watch those. So the next book is one that, again, I don't know a whole lot of, but I'm excited to read because the pitch that I've heard pretty much is like a sorority of witches, and that is The Ravens by Cass Morgan and Danielle Page. So, once again, I don't know a whole lot about this, but it just sounds like it's going to be a really fun book. I think it's like set at college around the sorority, and all the sorority members are witches. It just sounds like it's going to be a good time. So, to read you the synopsis. Only their sisterhood can save them. At first glance, the sisters of ultra-exclusive Kappa Rho Nu, the Ravens, seem like typical sorority girls. Ambitious, beautiful, and smart, they're the most powerful girls on Westerly College's Savannah, Georgia campus. But the Ravens aren't just sorority girls, they're witches. Scarlet Winter has always known she's a witch, and she's determined to be the sorority's president, just like her mother and sister before her. But if a painful secret from her past ever comes to light, she can lose absolutely everything. Vivi Devereux has no idea she's a witch, and she's never lived in one place long enough to make a friend. So when she gets a coveted bid to pledge the Ravens, she vows to do whatever it takes to be part of the magical sisterhood. The only thing standing in her way is Scarlet, who doesn't think Vivi is Raven material. But when a wicked power rises on campus, the girls will have to put their rivalries aside to save their fellow sisters. Someone has discovered the Raven's secrets, and that someone will do anything to see these witches burn. So that sounds really interesting, and something that equally excites me that I didn't know before reading that is that this is apparently set in Savannah, Georgia. I used to live in Georgia, and my grandparents live in Savannah, so that'll be really cool if maybe I can recognize any of the places they talk about. Final book I want to read this month is one that I've already talked about in my Books I Own and Need to Read video, but that is Toward Zero by Agatha Christie. I think what's drawing this to me at the moment is it's very bleak outside, cold, snowy, and that always just seems the right time to read a mystery book, specifically Agatha Christie's. There's just something about her book that screams winter, and I've always thought that murder mysteries pair particularly well with a dreary setting outside, which is exactly what we have right now. Agatha Christie is one of my favorite authors, and so anything she writes is like, I need to read that, and I've been working my quest to read all of her books recently. So this just seems like a great time to continue. The premise of Toward Zero is that there are a bunch of deaths that seem random at first glance, but apparently they're not, and we're basically following a detective as he tries to figure out how they are all connected. So it sounds interesting. I've liked pretty much everything I've read from Agatha Christie, so I'm excited to read this one. And once again, it's fairly short, so I would think I would be able to get through this one particularly quickly. And actually, that isn't the last one I'm actually going to be reading this month, because I forgot I'm currently reading a book for school. So I'd imagine we're probably going to be finishing this book this month because at the rate we're going, and it's not a very long book, so I just wanted to mention it. And that's Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson, but the adaptation for young adults. I've actually already read this book. I read the original version of it about 2-ish years ago, and it's one of my favorite books. I just love this book, and I think it's very important for people to read, and so I am very excited to read this. It's basically following Bryan Stevenson, who is an American lawyer who particularly works with cases on death row, as he follows a specific case to try to get this man off of death row who it is glaringly obvious that he's innocent. And it rotates. Every other chapter is about this case he's working on, and the other chapters just kind of look at the American justice system and point out all of its flaws. It's a really important book to read, and I highly recommend it, and I'm excited to get to reread it. So those are all the books I'm going to aim to read this month. I'll probably be able to read more, but I'm not quite sure, given as my reading in January started out really slow, but it ended up picking up near the end of the month, so I'm hoping that bodes well. Down in the description box below, you'll find a link to my Instagram and my Goodreads if you want to follow me there, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!